Good evening, everybody. I'll just give a quick introduction. I do see that one of our attendees has their hand raised, and we can probably respond to that right after my introduction and before the official opening of the meeting. If our moderators can't address that individually, we can answer that question. But why don't I go ahead and just give a quick introduction about the meeting. Welcome to the June 10th virtual Van Buren Township Planning Commission meeting. My name is Dan Power. I am the planning director for the township, and I will be also helping to facilitate the meeting. And I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and will also replay on our AT&T channel 99 and Comcast channel 12. All attendees will be muted until public comments are offered. And while there is no public hearing tonight, it's typical that we would entertain comments on the agenda items at the discretion of the chair. So there are ways to participate if there are comments on either of the agenda items tonight. The recommended way is once you've successfully logged into Zoom, which everybody here has done, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. You may have to move your mouse over or tap your screen to activate the icon. If your virtual hand is raised, and we have an example of this right now, we will introduce you and unmute your microphone when it's time for public comments. Before you make your comment, if you could just say your name and address for the record. And there's another way that you can participate, which is to type your comment into the chat window along with your name and address. We'll read your public comment out loud for the Planning Commission to hear, and when it's the appropriate time. The third way is if you are calling in, which some people need to call into the meeting, you would just dial *9 to activate your virtual hand raising, and you will be asked similarly to make a comment by the moderators and unmuted. So again, for public comments, please state your name and address for the record, and our moderators will record that. And please, just in interest of time, please keep the comments close to 3 minutes if possible, although we will probably have a slightly longer presentation by the applicant on tonight's agenda and by staff. If you have other questions, there are step-by-step instructions on how to join a Zoom meeting, and that link to the instructions is on the agendas and minutes webpage for the Planning Commission. So with that, I will see if we still have raised hand, and it sounds like the raised hand is resolved. So I will go ahead and turn this over to the Planning Commission Chair, Carol Thompson, and we can start the meeting formally.
Thank you, Director Powers, and welcome everyone to Planning Commission meeting, Van Buren Township, for Wednesday, June 10th of 2020. And we'll start with a roll call, please, Ms. Harmon.
Jeff Jar.
Here.
Donald Boynton. Brian Kelly.
Here.
Medina Atchison.
Here.
Sherry Budd.
Here.
Joan Franzoy.
Here.
Carol Thompson.
Here. Thank you, Ms. Harmon. Somebody need to add something? No. Okay. We have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, motion to approve.
Motion, Commissioner Jar, support?
Support, Commissioner Kelly.
Kelly, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Next on our agenda, we have minutes from the meeting of May 27th of 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, this is Medina Atchison. I'm notating that the minutes from May 27th, 2020 indicate draft.
Until they're approved, I believe, and then they would be final.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a good question. Are you making a motion, Commissioner Atchison?
Yes, I approve the minutes as they've been presented.
Thank you. Is there support?
Madam Chair, I support the motion.
Thanks, Commissioner Jar. Any changes or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the minutes are approved.
Through the chair, Carol, I think we remember to do roll call votes.
You are right, and that is my fault. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Let's go back and get a roll call vote on approving the minutes. Ms. Harmon, please.
Joan Franzoy,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Donald Boynton, Brian Kelly,
Yes.
Medina Atchison,
Yes.
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Carol Thompson.
Yes, thank you. And so the minutes are approved. We'll move right into new business on tonight's agenda. Item 1 is Clover Development, review and comment on proposed variances in association with the site plan. The applicant, Beth Arnott of Clover Development, is requesting review and comment on proposed variances related to architectural design and maximum accessory building area in association with the preliminary site plan and a special land use permit. The application is on vacant commercial site. The location is 8470 Belleville Road, and the property is located on the west side of Belleville Road between Tyler Road and Robson Road. We'll start first with a presentation by the applicant. Ms. Arnott?
And just before the applicant jumps in, if I'm sorry to interrupt the process just slightly, I do want to put a presentation up on the screen that the applicant has. And after Ms. Arnott presents her application, we'll go into a broader discussion by township staff. I see that we have our discussion after the applicants here. And so once there's a presentation by the applicant, staff will also provide their report materials. So I'll go ahead and put this on the screen and just very quickly say that this application is a pre-Board of Zoning Appeals discussion with the Planning Commission. So you'll see from the applicant what they're proposing. They are seeking 2 variances for a project that is planned to come back to the Planning Commission, but it has to be routed through the Board of Zoning Appeals first. So the intent here is to get some feedback from the Planning Commission and to present a broad overview of their proposal to the BZA when they're doing that. So again, I'll pass this over to the applicant, Beth Arnott, and I will share the screen with her slides, and I think we can invite her to speak to these matters. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and we can invite Beth up to speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
No problem. Good evening and thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate all the measures we're taking to make this happen. If you recall, I've been before the Planning Commission a couple times to talk about senior housing. So I'm here tonight to bring forward a project at 8470 Belleville Road. We do have the property under contract and are starting the process to submit for special use as well as site plan approval. Obviously, it's been delayed with ongoing, but we are to forward full ahead. 17.72 acres. It is currently vacant, unused, located right next to the State Farm building on Belleville Road. Clover is seeking to divide the property, approximately a 2-acre outlot for commercial development. Before I get into the specific, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Clover Group. Clover Group is based out of Buffalo, New York. We have, if you want to advance that slide. No. Keep going. independent living. So when we say senior, we are referring to a 55 and older. The 55 and older is set by HUD. Although we are not a HUD project, we are able to use the HUD regulations that allow us to age restrict a property. So 55 is set by HUD. We cannot change that and make it 65 or 62. It has to stay at 55. Our communities are active communities. They're not a full service retirement or assisted living. So independent living is a niche market. Our residents have full kitchens, washers and dryers. They are still active and they're completely independent. If we could advance the slide. So we look for specific properties that have demographics that work within our market. Van Buren Township is definitely one of those communities. Right now in Van Buren and within a 3-mile radius of this property, there's over 20,000 people over the age of 55. There's already an existing rental market, approximately 30% of the population, and the average home values are around 177,000. So that's important to us because when we say we're an affordable living environment, we want people to be able to sell their house and live with us for 10 years without needing Social Security and additional forms of income, which is going to be really important going forward in this market, not having, to rely on the stock market or other retirement funds to pay for living expenses. If you would advance. We do not impact peak traffic. Our residents control their schedules. They choose when they want to be on the road. We did do a traffic study, which will be presented at a site plan meeting specifically, but our peak travel hours between 2 and 3 p.m. and that's no more than 7 cars per hour in that time frame. We do pay full property taxes and we do not impact the school district. We do not have dining or healthcare on the property. So again, our residents are completely independent, though we do specifically target properties that have easy access to healthcare, religious institutions, grocery stores, shopping amenities. A big question that comes up is when is our trash pickup? That happens during normal workday hours. If you would advance. So specifically about this building, we're looking at a building that would be approximately 137,000 square feet. It would include 9,600 square feet of accessory structures or garages. It would be 3-story, well under the 40-foot maximum height, so our eaves hit about 32 feet. It is a wood frame building. It does have an elevator. It is ADA compliant. Each unit has a private outdoor space and balcony. And at this parcel, we would have 158 parking spaces, including 40 enclosed garages. Can we advance, please? This is just a slide showing our typical units. Each unit does have pull cords. It's wall-to-wall carpeting, individual heat and air conditioning, modern kitchen. Appliances and counter heights do meet ADA requirements, so they're a little bit lower than would be in a typical apartment. We do have walk-in showers, and again, every unit has either a patio or a balcony. Please advance. This is just our amenities. Our building is fully sprinkled. It's safe. It does have an alarmed entry, central indoor mail system. Trash is inside, so residents don't have to go outside to deposit their garbage. We do have a community room with, it says with kitchen, but by kitchen there's microwaves and refrigerators. We do not have any commercial cooking equipment on site. There's an exercise room, beauty salon, and a family room on each floor. We do have central laundry facilities in addition to each unit having a washer and dryer. And then we do have storage available for rental within the building. Next slide, please. So we'd be looking at approximately 125 units. The proposed density here would be approximately 7.9 units per acre. We would have an on-site infiltration pond. Outdoor recreation is located in the rear of the building. And again, each unit is fully sprinkled. The building is fully sprinkled. Moving forward, this shows the preliminary site plan. I know it's a little small, and I hope that you're able to see on your individual computers here or phones. We have created, because this property is located in the Belleville Road Overlay District, we have talked with staff and the DDA and feel it's important to be able to create a commercial component in the future. And in doing so, we're creating that out parcel that we could sell in the future for commercial development. So that out parcel is located just below the driveway coming in for future commercial use. The building is purposely set back. This is for the community. It's also for our residents to, be within the wooded area. As you know, the property is very wooded. We don't seek to remove or clear cut the lot. We want to take advantage of that wooded setting, and we want to have a building that is reminiscent of home versus being in a commercial development. So that home feeling is going to come up a couple times. This property is very conveniently located with access to E-Course, access to Michigan Avenue, Belleville Road, 94. That's very convenient for our residents to have access to major shopping opportunities, but still have that strong feeling of home. If we could advance. So in order to do this, we would need two variances. The first would be a variance from the architectural requirements of the BROD. We are proposing durable siding on 70% of the building. And then secondly, the new ordinance has a maximum accessory structure limit. The limit for this project would be 4,800 square feet. We are proposing 9,600 square feet. The entire accessory structure would be garages. Go ahead and advance, please. So addressing the maximum accessory coverage first, as a residential development, which was designated for a special use here, the garages are both practical and desirable as they reduce the parking surface, they screen the property, and they're constructed at a residential pedestrian scale that would not be visible from Belleville Road. The garages are identified as accessory, but we do feel that, they are part of this use. So these are not portico structures, these are full enclosed garages. Moving forward. All right, so this is kind of the big elephant in the room. The architectural requirements of the BROD are very, very typical of a commercial and mixed use project. You know, however, the proposed use here is independent senior housing. This is not a mixed use facility. Our residents, you know, we've been doing this for, like I said, over 30 years and have over 30 buildings throughout the Northeast part of the country. So we survey our residents. We've done a lot of work to create something that is very user-friendly and also attractive to this specific 55 and older community. One of the things that we know is nursing and skilled care facilities are very institutional in nature. They can be identified quickly by driving by and seeing they are all brick, they are all stone, they have the same portico entry, they are very identifiable as a nursing home or skilled care center. Additionally, projects that are funded or subsidized are also associated with large brick structures. You know, again, we want to separate ourselves to create that home feeling in the building. There's a second piece here, and that's we do create an affordable, go ahead, you can advance. We create an affordable, non-subsidized living environment. In order to maintain that as affordable, creating buildings that are large brick masonry structures does not equate to affordable rents for our users. So here is, you're currently looking at proposal. Building has stone accents throughout the bottom of the building, the entry, and then the stairwells would all be created out of stone. And then we would have a hardy board siding that would go throughout. Each of the balcony areas would be a board and bend design, breaking up the architecture, bringing in a, you know, a piece that kind of separates those from the rest of the building, breaking up the long facade. The west elevation there does show the patio area. So that is all open doors that leads from the community room to a large patio, usually filled with gas grills, other seating arrangements. It's really a gathering space. Moving to the next slide. Just so, you know, I kind of want to take this point and bring it more towards you. Here are some examples, and we can go through these pretty quickly, of assisted living. So this is obviously in Van Buren Township on the Service Drive, Cedar Woods Assisted Living. Again, this is a full face brick building. Moving forward. This is the Romulus Tower Apartments. These are income restricted. This is a full face brick building. They do have individual balconies. Again, very institutional. Next. This is Glen Abbey Assisted Living. Again, pulling up towards that, you know right away that you're dealing with an institutional living situation. This is Ypsilanti Town Center. This also is an income restricted building, full brick face, individual balconies. Next. Here's a common senior living. This is in Livonia. This is very similar to what we've proposed. Again, this is going for more the home feel This is senior independent apartments. So this is brick with, I'm not sure if it's hardy or vinyl siding. Next. This is a really good example. This is Oakmont in Livonia. This is a 1-story is the assisted living. And then the 3-story behind it is a vinyl and brick combination. Very little brick, mostly vinyl. That is the independent living. So that's what I have for presentation. I believe that Jared Keim is with us. I cannot see. He is our project engineer with Atwell. Dan, is Jared
Yes,
on?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Jared is here. I would just like to just take a moment to remind the attendees that tonight's discussion is really an introductory discussion. And the idea is for the applicants to, which they did in the last slides we looked at, make a case for an introduction to the 2 variance requests they're going to be seeking, and for the Planning Commission to give some preliminary feedback on the project that the BZA can use to make an informed decision. So I would just encourage that the presentation here, there will be other opportunities for presentation at a future Planning Commission meeting. That said, I will, staff will still have some comments shortly, but at the discretion of the chair, we can have the applicant continue if you'd like.
Sure, whatever Mr. Keim has to order. Thanks, Director Powers.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that with the architectural standards, we are intending to maintain the architectural standards of the Belleville Road Overlay District by providing the commercial out parcel out in front of the property, which will provide the architectural style that you want to appear along your commercial frontage there, while our building will provide the residential backdrop to everything, which will be screened by commercial parcel up front and a preserved wooded strip to provide additional for the property. So we are that residential backdrop while you'll still be able to achieve the desired architectural look along that corridor.
Great, thanks. Anything else now, Ms. Arnott?
No, I would love to answer any questions or comments that come up. I think I'll turn it back over.
Great, thank you. And of course, we'll come back to you if there are questions or other responses that we need. Right now, let's go to you. Director Power, who's speaking first? Is it you or is it Ms. Krishnan from McKenna?
I'd like to give a quick overview on, I will skip past a detailed summary of the project. I think the applicants did that quite well. I would like to give a quick overview of sort of the process and the Planning Commission's role, and then I'll turn it over to our planning consultant, Vidya Krishnan, to give an overview of her comments to date on this project. So I'll also have on display shortly, I can have images from the site plan and architectural submittals that the applicant provided. But just quickly, I'll mention, as you heard, this is a independent senior housing project with 125 housing units, just under 18 acres in a building footprint that's a little over an acre in area, just in terms of the footprint area. The BZA submittal is going to seek relief from architectural standards in section 6.309C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, as well as accessory building limits in 7.202A. This is also going to be a project that obviously involves a preliminary and final site plan review with the Planning Commission. And as such, there is, it's a good idea to have the Planning Commission have a chance to give an overview of a project that ends up having something that will require relief from the BZA or will make a case for relief from the BZA before that project comes back to the Planning Commission, so that there can be a continuous feedback loop with the Planning Commission as these decisions get made. The Planning Commission is not making a decision on the variances tonight. We are just asking that you provide your feedback with your lens of expertise, which includes looking at how the zoning ordinance applies to a project and giving some spatial perspective on what you can see about the property that might influence a BZA decision. So I just encourage you to kind of look with a critical eye at the property, give some analysis of your thoughts on the project at this stage. But keep in mind that the variance decision itself is going to involve a detailed review of the burdens and challenges of land use, unique circumstances of the property, this not being a self-created problem or issue, the request not diminishing conditions for neighboring properties, the request not impacting the health, safety, and welfare of the township, the character of the neighborhood, or the intent of the zoning ordinance. So that's an important set of criteria that the BZA has to review. You do not have to review that, but your perspective on the spatial aspects of this project will help the BZA in their decision on those various points. So again, your role is to hear from the applicant, as you just did, hear from staff, which Vidya Krishnan will give a more detailed overview. And then we'd like each of you to just state any brief observations you have, which you've done in the past for other variance cases that will be variance cases to the BZA before they go to the BZA, just as advisory comments from the Planning Commission. So with that, I will turn the staff report portion over to Vidya Krishnan, and then it will circle back to the Planning Commissioners to have some discussion before just closing this out on tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Powell. The basics of the project have been established, so I will jump straight into the zoning of the property. The site is currently zoned C2, which is Extensive Highway Business District. It is also located within the BDOD, which is the Belleville Road Overlay District, which is a mandatory overlay district. Now, the BDOD has got two sub-areas. The Gateway Mixed Use sub-area is the basis of design for this project. It basically encompasses the area north of Tyler Road. Now, the zoning ordinance does permit senior housing as a special land use in the C2 Extensive Highway Business District. Now, if you look at the architectural standards for the senior housing that the township not so long ago adopted, it has got specific standards. In addition to that, the BDOD is considered as the township's premier and primary business district. And the quality of buildings required in this district and in this overlay are much higher than would be required elsewhere within the township. The ordinance requires the use of unpainted red brick, brown brick, natural stone, or similar high quality material as the primary building material, which with materials such as EIFS, which is also sometimes referred to as another form of drybit. It is allowed in small percentages as an accent only. Some other materials such as T111 siding and plywood are strictly prohibited, both under the BDOD and under the Senior Housing Ordinance. As you saw, the applicant has put up elevations for you to see previously, and the structure is predominantly constructed of hardy plank lap siding and stone veneer. According to our ordinance, hardy plank board is permissible only as an accent material, not as a primary building material. Our ordinance also requires that for every 40-foot linear length of the building, you need to provide a feature that will break up the expanse of the wall. And there are multiple suggestions of how it can be accomplished in our ordinance. The percentage of various building materials that are being used on the facade also needs to be calculated because we have specific percentages of how much we allow for the various materials. Now, the applicant at this time is choosing to seek a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have worked with Ms. Ernak for a while now, and she has been very good in working with the township to get the plan into a position where it can be presented before you for consideration of special land use and site plan approval. However, architecture is a critical component of a site plan. We don't believe you can take the next step of granting preliminary approval without knowing what's going to happen to this architecture. Therefore, the applicant was directed first to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals, get any variances if necessary. If they don't, they will have to redesign and come back before you for preliminary site plan approval. As Ms. Ernak presented, The applicant's reasoning is that the BROD standards are primarily intended for commercial and mixed-use buildings with frontage on Belleville Road and not necessarily for the proposed independent living facility, which happens to be set back from the road. And the applicant also mentioned that the cost of building a structure in compliance with our ordinance standards with high-quality material would likely take the structure out of market rate, which is what Clover Group's target market is. The applicant has stated that the use of brick or similar material gives it an institutionalized look, which is contrary to their goal of providing a home-like setting. We do disagree. Brick and stone do not equal an institutionalized look. Architecture of a building is what determines whether a building is attractive or institutional appearance. Brick can be used and has been used in several historic buildings too. I mean, it's been used since time immemorial to give structures a very long-lasting look. The fact that the structure has got character to it. Brick adds character, and that's the reason why it was included as one of the primary recommended materials. As I mentioned, the applicant has worked with the township for a long time. In fact, Ms. Ermatt was one of the first entities to approach the township to consider the adoption of a senior housing ordinance. I mean, she has been really patient all this while, and since Director Akers' time, she has approached us to go with the senior housing. She has been part of the draft discussion. She has attended Planning Commission meetings where the senior housing ordinance was discussed. And although we were made aware that Clover Communities has got a different style of architecture for their buildings, the applicant did not raise a concern or protest adoption of these regulations at the Planning Commission or the Township Board of Trustees. They were present since the inception of this ordinance, since the drafts were written up, since we had public hearing, and since it was adopted. No word of protest was raised saying that this is not going to be something that would be adaptable to all kinds of proposals, especially the type of buildings that Clover builds. So at this time, we have a brand new adopted ordinance, and seeking a variance from an ordinance that is immediately adopted with just financial hardship. I will use the word as financial hardship, or not meeting what their market definition is. We do not believe sufficient justification or reasoning to actually waive the BROD district or the senior housing regulations, which were adopted in order to elevate Van Buren to a premier community status. We believe that if we open the door to granting a deviation based on the applicant's reasoning, it will not only undermine the current senior ordinance, but also future developments, which will say we need to provide high quality materials only along Belleville Road, and anything in the back can be pretty much any other material. That is a big concern. So as Director Powers mentioned, all we are looking from you tonight is to just present your thoughts. You will not be taking any formal motion of any kind. If you would just present your thoughts on what you think about this, your thoughts will be summarized and will be conveyed to the Board of Zoning Appeals so that they can render their decision. We also have a BZA liaison on the Planning Commission, Commissioner Kelly, which makes it very important so that the BZA generally don't deal with the site plan aspect of it, get an idea of what the Planning Commission is thinking. It's a critical aspect. This is exactly the kind of project where the different boards and commissions have to work together as a team in order to get the desired outcome. So I'll hand it off back to the board, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have, or basically if each of you would just give your impressions on the project and what your thoughts are, specifically only on the variance request. We are not discussing preliminary site plan items at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ms. Krishnan. Good summary. So planning commissioners, who wants to share their thoughts first?
Madam Chair, I have a question for staff or for the applicant.
Okay, Commissioner Jar.
Does the physical design of the building currently have the required architectural difference every 40 feet? It doesn't look like it does from the drawing. Is that currently in the design?
Am I able to speak?
Yes.
I can hear you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sure. Not. Can you answer the question, please?
Yes, I believe it does in two different ways. First, we do have the balconies that do break up every 40 feet. And where there's not balconies, there is the stairwells, and the stairwells are in brick veneer. Secondly, each of the balconies is coated with board and batten, which will also break up the architecture of the hardy board siding.
Thank you. Does
Yes,
staff
Mr.
concur
Burke.
with that?
Or, I'm sorry, Ms. Brittany.
Thank you. We will be looking at the ordinance again if stairwells and balconies are considered and offered as one of the things that would consider as a break in the architectural elevation, if that is considered as an acceptable. Like I mentioned, the ordinance has specifics as to what counts as providing the necessary division for every 40 feet. We will confirm that.
I would agree with that. We'll take a closer look. I think broadly the intent is to have some horizontal variety in terms of having some depth to a building facade and some vertical variation. Within those terms, we have to see if the stairwell and some of the features that were mentioned make that sort of difference and sort of break up in the facade. We'll make sure that that's very clearly part of the BZA's review, if that's necessary.
Great, thank you. What else do you have, Commissioner Jar?
Question for staff. One of the variances being sought is for doubling of the accessory structure size from 4,800, which is allowed in the ordinance, to 9,600 square feet, which is not allowed in the ordinance, by the ordinance. My question, and this is for staff, is an accessory structure that size allowed by our ordinances in any other zone, particularly the residential multifamily zone, or is this a problem with having put a senior development facility into a commercial property?
Good question. Staff, give your thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe the restriction to accessory buildings are limited to commercial sites for the reason that you don't want to have a restaurant and then have a whole storage unit or a shed built behind as accessory. Sometimes there are uses when they're allowed a residential type of use in a district such as this. The existing regulations might not necessarily work fully well, which is why we believe the garages do meet the intent of what the independent living is proposing to do. So that's why I haven't specifically referred to it in my letter. I don't believe the request is unreasonable. I think the requirement in the ordinance is well placed where it's supposed to be, but this is a case of a residential use in a C2 district. I believe Director Best wants to chime in.
Yes, under the residential standards, that if this was an apartment building, the 96, I think it's 9,600 square feet, would be a size of structure that would most likely be allowed by the ordinance. So there's some restrictions with this because it's in the mixed use district, and there's some restrictions in it because it has the commercial aspect to it. There's a commercial mixed use aspect to this. So it's not an unreasonable request. I would agree with Vidya. The main takeaway there is does it meet the test for a variance under the ordinance, and that's going to be a question for you to decide.
Now, I do note that there is a reference to carports or parking shelters as an accessory use to apartments and condominiums, and clearly there are those structures at some of our apartment complexes in the township. But in terms of the current ordinance's restrictions, that still applies, that there is the limit on detached accessory structures for this zoning district. So that's the grounds on which we have to move forward for this particular application.
Through the chair, if
Certainly.
I can relay a thought on that. if the size is allowable in a district in which an apartment complex of this size was also allowable, my feeling is that perhaps we would consider allowing the size of the garage. If 4,800 square feet is the maximum size of accessory structures, including garages, everywhere in the township, then I feel that this is probably not a reasonable request for the BZA to grant.
Okay, good summary. Anything else? Anything on design, materials, architecture? Commissioner Jar?
If none of my other commissioners have anything they'd like to say at this time, I do have a few more thoughts.
Great, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the requirement for brick, the ordinance is clear. It is required in the Belleville Road Overlay District. In fact, we have an ordinance that specifically requires it in that. We even have an ordinance that specifically says buildings that are of a franchise nature that do not conform to the Belleville Road Overlay District must conform to the overlay district. It's spelled out in the ordinance. I would counsel the BZA that the ordinance is actually very clear about what is to be done in this situation, and the answer is the brick requirement is a strong one. One of the reasons that this property is in such a convenient location for the applicant is because it is in the Belleville Road Overlay District. It takes advantage of the design constraints and the consistency that part of our township brings. It would seem to me that keeping in the spirit of the overlay district is an important continuing the success that that area. Anyone would like to comment?
Great, thanks so much. Other commissioners?
Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Francis.
I agree. Yes, I agree with Commissioner Jar about the brick. I really think it's an important feature, and as he pointed out, it was specifically put into the ordinance. As far as the garages, I like the idea of them having the garages versus the carport. It would be if they could break them up. I mean, there's 10 in a row, it looks massive. Even if it could be 5 with a little space in between. It's my only comment of the garages that would be a lot.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Franz. Anything else?
Madam Chair, there were some other points brought up by the applicant that I think the BZA needs to consider. Several of the applicant's comments were related to financial difficulties of development. And choice of material absolutely plays into the marketability of a property. Unfortunately, for the purposes of seeking a variance, the BZA isn't allowed to consider that. Financial hardship can't weigh into the decision. It must one that specifically is not financial. I don't see a practical difficulty with building this structure in brick. I also do not agree with the applicant, although I don't want to dismiss her many years of experience in the market, knowing her customer base, but I live in a brick house. I don't think it looks institutional. There are brick 3-story apartment buildings in Van Buren Township that also don't look institutional. They're very nice. And I believe, I agree with staff that the choice of the material isn't what gives the building the institutional appearance, it's the overall architecture of the building. I do like the development. I'm for the senior housing. I hope we're able to move forward with the project. But I don't think I could recommend to the BZA a variance for the material. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the-
Well,
Through
Yeah.
the chair, I would agree with both Joan and Jeff, because I believe it's something that's very needed in the township. I think the request for garages is reasonable, because I know if it was someplace I was at, I'd want a garage. And I think most of them that are going to be there, that's what they would like, especially with our winters the way they are. But I also agree that the building has to, excuse me, has to have that architectural design so that it fits what's in that district.
great. Thank you very much. Anything else right now, Commissioner Bud?
No, thank you.
Okay. Other commissioners? Commissioner Atkinson, do you have anything?
Yes, Madam Chair. My only thing that I want to say is I agree with all of the commissioners. However, we've often said that we are a premier community. However, we lack any kind of independent senior living. So my recommendation is that if at all possible, we could make, could we possibly have the BZA make this decision? And that, you know, we have a business need in a sense, because we have a human need to allow all of our residents to age in place, versus once they become older, yet they're still very independent and they have many more years to live, that we would retain them in our community. That is my position on it. And we have 0 independent senior living. So from a business need, from being able to say we're a premier community and truly are being a premier community, that would mean we have housing for all residents at all stages of life.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Atkinson. Commissioner Franzoy, did you have something else?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly, I haven't heard from you. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking pretty much what everybody else is thinking this evening. It's a great project. It's something the community really needs. I have issue with not following the look for the corridor, but I think the garage is more than reasonable.
Great. Thank you. Let me ask the moderators, do we have any public comment that we should hear at this point?
Chairperson?
I'm sorry, I do actually see a hand raised from one other representative of the project. If you'd like to entertain what Mr. John Ackerman has to say, I can.
All right, and then I want to come back and hear what Ms. Christian had to say. So Mr. Ackerman, we'll go to you first.
Sure, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I get loud and clear what everyone is saying about the B-ROD architectural standards. And I just wanted to add, and I know Jared Kahn from our office had mentioned this before, that the intent of that is to provide an aesthetic quality along the Belleville Road corridor. That anyone that's interacting on Belleville Road, driving or walking, is going to experience those architectural standards. The intent of our development is our building is set north of 400 feet off the road. Until the commercial development is built up front, that parcel is going to remain fully wooded. Our building is not going to be extremely visible from Belleville Road. And then once the commercial component out parcel up front is developed, then that commercial component would then meet all of the design intents and requirements of your overlay district. So in order to satisfy that side of everything. So I fully understand your thoughts on our building itself, but I just wanted to see if we could get any input from the commission based on the context that this building is going to be hidden to an extent behind other uses up front or natural vegetation. That's all I had to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Ms. Christian, did you have something to add to this discussion?
Yes, I just wanted to provide additional thought to the commission and to the applicant. While I understand what the applicant is trying to say in terms of the situation of the building and the fact that it's going to be concealed from view, And I also acknowledge the need for such a use in the community, which was the driving force behind creating the ordinance in the first place. However, when you ask for a deviation from the ordinance, the standards based upon which the Board of Zoning Appeals must review the ordinance is based on specific standards set forth in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And none of those standards include the fact whether it's visible, whether it's situational context. It basically says, will compliance with the ordinance standards prove to be unnecessarily burdensome? Is there a practical difficulty? Practical difficulty is typically something, a limitation that is innate in the land itself, such as topography or drainage, that makes compliance with ordinance standards unreasonable. The kind of things we are discussing really are not set forth as criteria for consideration of variances under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. But that is, of course, for the Board of Zoning Appeals to determine. But I just wanted to make clear, because I do understand what the applicant is saying. If the building is not even going to be visible, how does it matter if it's got hardy plank? But that is opening the door to the next applicant saying, okay, I'm going to build a building 50 feet away, and in the 50-foot setback, I will plant 200 trees. So you'll never see my building from the road. And, so when an ordinance requirement is there and you're seeking a deviation, the deviations have to be strictly reviewed based upon the standards set forth in state law, not based upon just situation related to that individual property itself in this case. Although variances are unique and run with each individual parcel, it has to meet the standards. So I believe we have enough feedback from all of the board members, which I believe Director Power, myself, can summarize. We'll just put together the notes, whatever you said, and provide it, and then the BZA can make their decision, I believe.
Thanks, Ms. Krishnan. I would just like to add that I too support the project. We worked really hard to create an opportunity for seniors to be included and encouraged in Van Buren Township. But our design standards have also had the same investment, and I think they're important to hold on to. And I understand the discussion point from the applicant that it is a residential use in a commercial district, but we do have some brick requirements in our residential use as well. So it isn't just something that we require commercially. And I also have no problem with the increased size for the garages, but I agree with Commissioner Franz. The garages need some architectural improvement and either break up in long linear expansions, possibly some smaller collections of garages, so that it isn't just, I don't want the garages to end up looking like the storage buildings just up the road on Belleville Road. So that would be my. Is there anyone else who has anything to add to assist the applicant and staff on this agenda item?
I do see
All right.
Best has his hand raised, so perhaps he has something else to add.
Director Best?
Thank
Did we
you,
miss
Madam Chair.
something?
No, I just want to bring back around to the discussion point that the guidance that you're giving tonight will be the guidance that the BZA will take as the thoughts of the Planning Commission on this application for a variance. The BZA is the one that, of course, based on practical difficulty, but the comments that you make tonight and you've made tonight are the ones that are going to be the guiding points that will be summarized and taken back to the Planning Commission or to the BZA. With that said, whether the development is a graded development or not, the item that will be discussed is the two variance points, which is the size of the accessory structure for the variance and the architectural standards being met through the BROD district. If there's any additional thoughts that the public has on this, this is also something that can be sent or the app to be added to the DA, and that also goes for any of the public in the area who want to make comments. So I thank you for letting me explain that one last time. So thank you.
Great, that's great, Director Best. We do want to have public comment as often as we can. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Commissioner Jar?
Thank you. Just following what Director Best has said, I want to make clear my thoughts on the garage variance. I asked whether a structure of the requested size is allowed anywhere in the township because if it turns out that our senior ordinance in a commercial zone somehow overlooked or unfairly limited the size that the garage unit could be in comparison to the same apartment building built in a different district, that could be cause for calling it an unreasonable hardship. If there is no other district in the township where a garage could be built, then I don't believe the argument stands. Trying to make sure that we didn't miss something in our ordinance that unfairly limits the size of the structure for the applicant. Thank you.
Sure. Good reminder. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Last call on this agenda item. All right. Thank you so much to the applicant for bringing us the material and giving us a chance to weigh in early on in our part of the process, not early on in your process. And very much thank you to the staff for all of your preparation and your thoughtful work with the applicant to bring us to this point. I'm moving on to agenda item 2, which is discussion of zoning ordinance amendments, C, local business district amendments. Further discussion to be held regarding proposed amendments to add clarification in order to distinguish commercial and residential non-commercial land uses in the C local business district with respect to maximum building size and clarifying restrictions on dwelling in non-residential zoning districts. Amendments will be to section 3.105 through section 3.110D, required conditions of the C local business district, and 5.1 dwellings in non-residential districts. We'll start first with a presentation by staff. You first? Great.
I'll do that. Just give a very quick, I think Christian has really an in-depth analysis that I will defer to, but I want to just give a broad overview. And as a reminder, the Planning Commission, you folks, before the multi-month shutdown, you had reviewed the set of zoning ordinance amendments that was just described on March 11th. And we are continuing this review, and there is a public hearing scheduled to review this again on June 24th coming up. So I think one of the outcomes of tonight's discussion is to generate some additional, if there are any additional questions or inquiries or any additional zoning research that you would like us to do, we can certainly bring that forward to the public hearing on the 24th. But otherwise, this is just to continue to offer as many opportunities for public comment as are possible and discussion as possible with the Planning Commission members. So again, just to recap, what we are looking at is ordinance amendments related to the C local business zoning district. There are a number of uses in every zoning district, and even in commercial zoning districts, there are non-commercial uses permitted either by right or by special land use. There are uses like schools, public buildings, senior housing, and others that have been determined to be potentially as either special land uses or uses by right. One of the items that we've researched over the past few months, certainly related to a development that's in the process of being reviewed related to senior housing, is that we saw that there was a need for clarification that non-commercial uses have a different scope, size, and intensity than commercial uses. And so where certain commercial land uses have limits on the building area in this zoning district, the same does not necessarily make sense for non-commercial uses or residential uses. So that's the reason that we wanted to have this discussion. We wanted to clarify that and to sort of tease that out and look at it in more detail to note that when the ordinance was written for the C district, it did not necessarily anticipate all of the different uses and the fact that some of the uses in this district would be relatively low intensity relative to some of the commercial uses you'd see. So this is a continuation of that discussion. There's also a related discussion of related amendment where there's discussion of the presence of housing in C zoning district. So these zoning ordinance amendments are continuing to be up for discussion. There are a number of materials included with this packet, including a memo from Vidya Krishnan, a display of C district uses and trip generation from these uses, which is one of the things that we wanted to look at in more detail following the March 11th meeting. And then a map of the scope of where there is C zoning, C local business zoning in the township, just to show where this type of ordinance may apply if it's revised. And just some graphic examples for reference points of some of the land uses that are permitted in this zoning district. So again, this is primarily about the size of buildings in the C local commercial zoning, local business zoning district, and removing the restrictions on size for non-commercial buildings. So with that, Vidya Krishnan has another memo out about this, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Director Powell. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Continuing our ongoing discussion, we initiated this in the early part of the year and then it got put on hold because of the pandemic. While working on some ordinance amendments towards the end of last year, we realized that the C district had a footnote that regulated the size of any single building in the district. Typically, the size of development in any zoning district is dictated by the setbacks, green belts, amount of parking required. That automatically decides how big your building can be. We don't necessarily have any district that says this is all your building can be, except that requirement was there in our C district from a long time ago. To our knowledge, there is no other zoning district that actually has such a limitation. The only time we have used building size to differentiate is when we differentiate warehouses from distribution centers based on the square footage of the building and the dock to floor area ratio. That is the only other place in the ordinance where we actually refer to the gross square footage of a building, nowhere else. Now, the intent of the C district was to limit the traffic generated from any single commercial use. It was never intended when the C district was written that this should be applicable for residential uses, because it was never anticipated when the C district regs were written that there was something called senior housing or something of a residential nature would ever be allowed in the district. As Director Powell mentioned, we put up the map a little bit further down the discussion. We have a handful of parcels in the township that are zoned C. And we have not reviewed a site plan in a C zone parcel, at least in the or so. So it's not development. The few parcels that we have are very small, so it's not really been point of focus even when we were doing it. I spoke to Patrick Sloan, previous consultant who was actually instrumental in doing the whole zoning ordinance rewrite. And he said at the time the committee did not look in depth into the C district because it was just one of those districts that didn't see much development and that was left over. Now the C district allows for a lot of uses, which includes sit-down restaurants, strip commercial buildings, professional medical and dental offices. These type of uses might have a very small building footprint, but they can generate a lot of traffic. If you look at a dental office, especially an orthopedician, you would see that the building might be 2,000 square feet. But if they have 8 dental chairs, they have 8 patients sitting in, several that are coming off cleaning, and there are 8 more waiting. So the amount of traffic generated even by the small footprint is significant. Last time I presented to you data for the various uses that would be allowed in the C district, how much traffic they'll generate. It just seemed like a bunch of numbers that didn't make much sense. So this time I tried to represent it graphically, because something that is visual makes more impact. You actually can understand and appreciate what the difference might be. Based upon the trips generation thing that we see. Let me put up the trip generation share that's on my screen. Okay, let us say share. Are you seeing the right thing? Are you seeing the trip generation screen?
We were, if you could make it full screen, that might be better.
Ah, okay. Can you see it now?
No.
You had it, Vidya, and then it shrunk itself down. You want to try again?
Oh. Dan, could you please put up the trip generation thing, please?
Yeah,
Take off my share and go ahead and put the trip generation screen on there.
Are you, if you're able to stop sharing on your end.
Okay, okay. Let me do that. And how do I do that? Oh, yeah, hang on. I stop sharing. Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Stop share. Yes, I got to stop share. Okay, I stopped.
Okay, let's see if I can get this on my
So
pad.
while Dan is getting that on, so the amendment at this time is not being done to address any specific project. It is just that it seemed to come to light coincidentally at the same time. The amendment that is before you tonight is actually to correct a requirement in the ordinance that is too generalized and not intended for specific application. It also adds clarification that prevents big box development from coming in, because most of the C parcels that we have, they are located in local neighborhoods. So the intent is to prevent. Now, if you look at the C uses trip generation chart, and the trip generation data is from ITE. ITE is a nationally recognized institution that puts forth traffic trip generation data every year in their annual ITE manual, and that is sort of the Bible by which we go when we do traffic trip calculations or traffic engineers use it. If you look at some of the uses are different because they don't go by square footage, they go by number of beds. We try to make it as reasonable an apples to apples comparison as possible. So if you look at this chart, if you have a 30-bed assisted living facility, it would generate approximately 82 trips a day. 60 beds would generate 164, and 90 beds would generate 247. If you had something like a medical or dental office, a 10,000 square foot building would generate 32, a 20,065, and a 30,097. Now, if it were to be a restaurant, which is a principal permitted use in the C district, a 10,000 square foot restaurant footprint has got the capacity to generate approximately 1,584 trips per day from the site. And it increases exponentially when you look at larger building footprints. Same goes for a retail or a strip mall based upon a mix of uses. In fact, when we first gathered the data and plotted this chart, we were a little surprised and thought maybe we got the numbers wrong, because this looks kind of just too much. It seems ridiculously exponential, but we double and triple checked our data from ITE, and this can be the potential traffic generated from a building of this footprint. When we originally adopted, when we adopted the rewritten zoning ordinance, it has 348 pages. Whenever you adopt a new zoning ordinance in its entirety, you try to find points of conflict and take them out. You try to repeal them. In this case, this one footnote in a 348-page document was not attended to. As a result, there is a repealer clause when we adopted the senior housing that we could use, but we don't believe that is the right way to handle the ordinance amendment. We believe the right way to do it is to correct the ordinance, which does not sync with current development patterns or what the intent of application of the original use was. So the draft ordinance that is before you tonight basically corrects the notation in the C district. You have a copy of that. Director Power, if you could please put the draft text amendment on there. Yes, I think you have to scroll up. Yes, previous page, please. So if you look at the page, all the underlined text shows new text that is being added. So basically what we are trying to say is we are still keeping many of the limitations with the intent to prevent big box development, but we say no single commercial use may occupy a portion of a building, or a portion of a building greater than 10,000. No commercial use, which was the intent of the original requirement anyways. We also added a subsection B2B5 which says the maximum size of a building used for non-commercial or residential uses. At this time, the only residential use that is being permitted in all these C districts is senior housing. We don't know if there are going to be other new types of uses coming up. In the planning circles currently, because of this global pandemic, there is already a lot of discussion on what new types of uses are needed to help people, because the current situation is not something anybody anticipated. And so we have got to plan for living successfully, even in the event of such a situation coming up. So it's not necessary that there might not be other uses in the future included in the C district that might not be strictly commercial. So in order to cover that, we would like to say, when Commissioner Jar looks a little puzzled when I said what type of uses. For example, in one of my other community clients, we do not permit accessory dwellings in an agricultural district. Only one principal dwelling is permitted. So the gentleman said, if I have a 5-acre parcel, why can't I build a second unit as a home for my aging parents so that I can take care of them when I have the acreage and I exceed the single family residential requirements? Right now, we don't allow that, but that is a change in the ordinance we have got to. He said, I would rather have them with me than put them in some faraway facility in some other town. When I have 5 acres, I should have the ability. In the current situation, it worries me more that they are not with me. So planning is now trying to anticipate these various kind of uses and challenges to traditional norms of uses that is coming up. So the subsection 5 that we have added sort of covers that also. The maximum size of a building used for non-commercial or residential uses shall be dictated by compliance with all ordinance regulations for setbacks, parking, green belts, and other site design requirements. We are not in any way, shape, or form saying that the buildings can be bigger at the cost of not providing enough parking, at the cost of reducing their green belts, at the cost of taking away land that might be required for stormwater detention or planting of trees or proper circulation. All of those still have to be met. So this is the essence of the change that we are proposing to the commercial district. We believe the amendment proposed is reasonable. Director Power, if you could just show the map that shows us how many C-zone parcels we actually have in the township at this time. It's barely a handful. So the ordinance that we are looking at tonight is basically to correct something that has been on the books for a while and is not practical to apply at this time. Now, here is the sum total for a township as big as ours. Those are all the C parcels that we have. In fact, the parcels that are south of the city of Belleville, if you look at the Hull Road, parcels are so small, they are not going to be usable unless a bunch of them are actually combined to form a single entity, because they're too small to meet the requirements of the district. So you have a handful, one on West Huron River Drive, cluster of small ones on Hull Road, one on Savage, only those 3 on the south side. And on the north side, you have only 2, one of which I believe is, might be a gas station or a convenience store up on Hannon. I don't know what's up there, but on Hannon Road, Ecorse and Hannon, that's Tyler and Hannon.
That's vacant property.
That is.
Oh, that is still vacant. Okay, so that is also not used. So this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 individual properties and then a little cluster in one place. This is the sum total, and we have one upon Michigan Avenue. I'm sorry, that's a very small parcel also with significant wetlands on it. So we have basically a handful of parcels when compared to all the other C2 zone, C1 zone parcels, proposed mixed-use parcels, office technology, M1, M2. Amount of land area occupied by C is relatively insignificant, as a result of which this district requirements that are in our zoning ordinance have been kept forever. So what I would request of you tonight is any questions you might have, Director Powers, Director Best, and myself would be happy to clarify. And basically what we are looking at is to clear an ordinance and correct an ordinance whose application cannot be across the board. This particular limitation places a restriction that is unreasonable at this time, in our opinion. So our recommendation is to correct that so that the ordinance still meets the intent for which it was originally written, namely to prevent big box or large strip generation uses within a local neighborhood parcels. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Krishnan. That was very thorough, and I appreciate the extra documentation that you were able to bring to us. I do remember that discussion about traffic and trip generations, and I found the graph to be helpful. So, commissioners, questions or comments for any of the staff in relation to the drafts that we're looking at for the ordinance amendment? Anyone?
Madam Chair, Mr. Jeff.
Hey, Commissioner Jar.
Question for staff. Is it clear in the rest of the ordinance document that we reviewed a site plan this evening for a senior living facility that is really a deed restricted 55 and older, well, call it an apartment complex. We've also in the recent past reviewed site plans for assisted living facilities that are presumably a for-profit service granting entity. Is it clear in the rest of the ordinance that whether both of those type of senior facilities are either considered residential or non-commercial? I guess what I'm asking is there any way to confuse what a commercial use is versus a residential use with regard to our senior housing ordinance?
There are clarifications on commercial use categories or land use types in the table of permitted uses in the zoning ordinance, and I believe that is the relationship that is established when we use the term commercial. I will look into that further, however.
Thanks. You know, the break that we took, I couldn't remember if that was something we addressed earlier. I want to make sure that it is addressed so that the ordinance change, should it be adopted, is clear. We don't have to come back and revisit it. Thanks.
I remember, Commissioner Jar, you had brought it up at a meeting with Director Power and myself. Yes, it does ring a bell. And I think at the time we had discussed that at the beginning of our zoning ordinance, we have a table of uses, which basically is a tabulated chart that says which use is permitted in which district. It's like columns with like little black boxes. And those uses are split up based upon commercial, residential, and this. So I think commercial and residential use is qualified not based upon whether it is for profit or rental situation or something. I think it's fact of, you make a good point, but that clarification is something we will look into and make sure it's already there in the ordinance. That's a point well made.
Thank you very much. That's all I had. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Jar. Other commissioners? Anyone? Do we have, as the moderator, do we have any public comment?
I do see that there are a number of attendees that are left. There's Rosemary Otzman from the Belleville Area Independent. There's also Lisa Martin and a Larry. So I guess at this point, I would like to ask either of those attendees, if you'd like to speak, you can certainly use the hand raise icon or use the chat to clarify if you'd like to make any comment at this point.
And if you're just on the phone, you can put in your, suppose it's star or whatever. Dan.
Star 9, that's right.
All right, I'll have you continue to watch the other attendees and go through the commissioners. Any questions or comments before we get to the point where we're moving into ordinance adoption, the amendment adoption? So anything else that you want staff to look at or clarify or bring back to our next discussion?
Through the chair,
Yes, Director Power.
I could just add one comment. You will notice in the description of this item that there is a reference to another code section that just in regard to clarifying another related aspect of the commercial zoning district, there is a a reference to dwellings in non-residential districts that will need to be just very minorly clarified to say that unless otherwise permitted as permitted or special land uses, the dwellings in non-residential districts section will also be part of amendments that are brought forward on the 24th.
Good. All right. This will be a final call then for any comment from planning commissioners or the public. Hearing none. I will thank staff for preparing additional materials for our review, and it looks like you've answered the questions that the commissioners had from the previous discussion. Thank you very much. Next item on tonight's agenda is a general discussion item. I'll ask staff first if you have any general discussion items to share with us.
Madam Chair, I just have one item that I'll share.
Thanks, Director Beth.
While we want everyone to still work as remote as possible, the time has come for the township doors to thankfully open once again on June 15th. The township will be open for business. While we do encourage you to use the web and use the email and use your phone, if you have to come in, the township is there to serve you. If you have a planning question, as always, you can email us. But if you need to get your dog license or pay your water bill there, or register to vote or have a question for the assessor, you can contact them by email, phone. But if you have to come in, we will be open starting June 15th.
Great. Thanks for letting everyone know.
Yes.
Anything else for general discussion? Staff? Anything from planning commissioners?
I missed my opportunity a second ago. Just there will be a meeting on the 24th. This set of zoning amendments related to the C zoning district and dwellings in non-residential zoning districts will be on the agenda for that meeting as a public hearing. There will be also a special land use and preliminary site plan review for a commercial project on the North Service Drive on that agenda as well. So we are continuing with the pace of planning commission meetings that we're probably a little more familiar with for this time of year. It's just that they will be done remotely for the foreseeable future.
Great. Thanks. Always good to know what's coming up. I'll ask anyone in the audience, general discussion item. Moderators, do we have anybody?
Nope, it doesn't appear like it.
Looks like everything's quiet. If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks. Support.
Support.
Support. Commissioner Atkinson. All in favor, say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Okay. Excellent. Good discussion, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
Good evening.
Good night.